guys, it's Megan here, the faithful fibromyalgia warrior, also known as Healing Foods Coach. So I hope everyone is well today. Today's topic, and this might be news for some of you if you're maybe new to the channel, new to carnivore. Otherwise, it will not be new, or it shouldn't be new to those of you who have already started this or have been doing it for some time. But animal fats and protein are not what make us fat. That's not what got us fat, okay? Now, before I jump in, let me just quickly remind you guys, I am currently offering a limited time only discount on my initial consultation and coaching assessment. Usually it's a 2-hour block, and that gives you and I one-to-one time for up to 2 hours to help you get started going on this carnivore journey. If you feel like you need a little bit more individualized approach, a little bit more personal support, I offer that. You can go to the website and And the details are listed. Also, you can email me if you need more clarifications or have any more questions about that. All right, so animal fat does not make us fat. It doesn't, okay? Animal fat is healthy, it is healing. Animal fats, saturated fats for the most part, although fatty fish have unsaturated fats. But fats in general from an animal source is not what makes us fat, nor is the protein. If you're eating it in moderation, if you're eating it when you're hungry, stopping when you're feeling full and satisfied, that is not what gets us fat. What gets us fat, okay, and again, not trying to talk down to anybody. If you already know this, fantastic. But if you don't, this may help. What makes us fat is not animal sources of protein, so muscle meat, and the fat that it comes with naturally. That is not what gets us fat. What has made us fat globally is processed added sugar, highly processed industrialized seed oils, and a highly carbohydrate-centric diet. And here's kind of how it works, right? So when we eat carbohydrates, every single carbohydrate from a plant, every single carbohydrate that comes from a plant converts into glucose in the body when it's digested and metabolized, okay? That will always result in raising our blood glucose levels, which then causes the insulin to go up as well. And just to say quickly, we all need some amount of insulin. Without insulin at all, we would all be dead. So we need some insulin, okay? But what happens is it spikes up our blood sugar, which then triggers the insulin to go up. And it is this constantly having high insulin levels to the point where we are no longer sensitive. We resist the signals because we are constantly so over full of insulin. We are so overfull of sugary glucose in our blood from a high carbohydrate and processed diet that we can no longer sense when we're actually hungry. We can no longer sense when we're actually full. And as long as insulin is raised, it prevents the body from breaking down and accessing stored body fat for fuel. So basically, if we are people who are consuming a lot of carbohydrates, like I'm not talking 20 total grams or even 50 total grams a day. Okay, I'm talking the standard 200 plus grams of carbohydrates easily that people consume on a standard Western diet. We are in constant states of high blood glucose and raised insulin. And as long as our insulin levels stay raised, we will not access our excess of fat that's deposited on our body to burn off. So that means we are only accessing really the foods as we eat them. Now, the really bad part is that when we eat, let's say we have a bowl of cereal with skim milk and bananas or peaches or something from the fruit family that often has not only glucose, but fructose in it, which is also not good for us, okay? And it keeps our insulin levels high. We will eat that, and basically only a very small percentage of that actually gets used for glucose that goes right to the brain. Some of that does get stored as glycogen in our muscles and our liver, but the muscles and liver can only store a very limited amount of the total that we are consuming every day. Everything else that we've eaten, it's not like we just go to the bathroom and it's all gone. It doesn't work like that. Whatever's left, the brain doesn't use, and that our muscles and liver cannot store, gets converted into fat and stored in our adipose tissue around our midsections, around our organs. And over time, that just builds and builds. And so you may be somebody who has always eaten, you know, the whole wheat this and the oatmeal that and the fruit smoothie here and there. The problem is, because it's so full of dietary glucose and often fructose, which then becomes glucose in the blood, we are keeping our insulin levels raised to the point where our body stops being able to actually recognize the signaling. We become resistant to the insulin signals. And so we not only don't make effective use of these dietary sources of glucose, but we have more and more of it stored as fat in our bodies. And so it's not like it happens overnight, okay? It doesn't. But you could have somebody who, for example, like me at 35, I was slightly overweight, maybe 10, 15 pounds over my ideal weight, relatively healthy, loved oatmeal and cereal, and it was always skim milk and fat-free yogurt, and always margarine, and it was always whole wheat toast or whole wheat bread for sandwiches, all the good things, okay? But over the next 10, 15 years, my weight ballooned. I was becoming more exhausted. I started to deal with a bit of inflammation. My IBS got really bad. My skin started breaking out all the time. I couldn't understand. My menstrual cycles were painful and awful. And I didn't think anything of it. I thought, oh, it's just me getting older. And even if I did start going to the gym, I couldn't seem to lose weight. Sorry, when I say weight, I'm talking about body fat. I lost a bit of water weight occasionally if I didn't eat for 2 or 3 days. And then, of course, that would lead to binging. Okay. And so even though I did a lot of walking, I started going to the gym, I just couldn't seem to lose any body fat because I was still feeding myself with low fat or no fat. And I was eating unbelievable amounts of carbohydrates, both whole, fresh fruit and veg, as well as the processed stuff. That was the problem. You know, I wouldn't really eat red meat. I didn't really have sausages. I would stick with like chicken, and I made myself try to eat fish from time to time, and it didn't make any difference. And I couldn't understand why, because I didn't realize how things worked at that point. As long as you are getting the majority of your dietary intake from carbohydrates, which, by the way, come from plants. All plants are carbohydrates. Every single plant is a carbohydrate, and every single one of them will eventually become glucose in your blood, keeping your insulin levels high. It is not the animal fats and protein that got me fat. It was the vast quantities of fruit. It was the vast amounts of whole wheat toast with peanut butter and jam. It was the occasional brownies once a week. It was getting as little fat as possible, eating things like seed oils and margarine, hydrogenated fat, and eating a lot of starchy vegetables. We are taught that 55% of our calories should come from a starchy carbohydrate source, which is crazy, ridiculous. No, that is not how we even out our avoid blood spikes. Reducing or completely removing carbohydrates is actually how we maintain our blood glucose levels. Nothing else will do that, okay? That's how you actually do that. That's a different topic for another time. But it was all of the plant materials that made me fat. Why? Because as long as you are burning glucose as your primary fuel source, your body is not able to effectively burn body fat. It simply doesn't work. It will not work because they're two different systems and it's either one or the other. And so when you dramatically reduce your carbohydrate intake, whether it's down to 50 grams total a day, like is often followed with a low carbohydrate diet, or 20 grams if you're going to be more keto in your approach, or you're going to be like me and just completely remove them, that is a game changer. Because once you get those out of your body is then able to start burning its own fat for fuel because it needs to. In the absence of carbohydrates, our bodies are designed specifically to go and make the glucose the brain requires from what? From the end production of protein and fat metabolism. So things like pyruvate from the amino acids and glycerol from fat, those things bond and form together to create glucose for the brain. We do not need to eat it in order to have what the brain requires. And when we start to burn our own body fat, it's even better because fat as a fuel source gives us much longer energy for a much greater period of time. So I can have something like some egg yolks with some butter and a bit of chicken breast, say for breakfast. And because it's got all kinds of good protein and fats, that keeps me feeling satisfied for the next 4 to 5, sometimes 6 or 7 hours, depending on what I get up with during my day. Today, I actually managed to do 4 miles of walking. I had to run some errands into town to the grocery store, came home, and then I took the dogs for a walk. Because that is the energy that my onboard body fat has provided. That is the beauty of carnivore and an animal-based diet, is that these fats are not what cause us to be fat. These are not concerns for our cholesterol. These are not concerns for our health. These are good things, in fact. Contrary to what may be out there, the reality is that animal sources of protein with the fat it comes with is actually the best possible thing for our health. Now, again, some people still want to keep in a few vegetables, maybe some low carbohydrate berries when it's berry season. Go ahead. Absolutely. I have, why not? If you can tolerate it and you don't seem to have any kind of a gut issue response, enjoy them. Absolutely. I wish I could. I miss blueberries. Blueberries were my favorite thing. I miss blueberries, but I can't have them because of my gut issues. I can't do it, unfortunately. I wish I could tolerate things like broccoli or asparagus. I would enjoy some steamed asparagus or broccoli with a piece of steak or with some ground beef, but I can't because I have IBS and gut issues. Therefore, I don't. But if you can, absolutely. If that's going to help you find variety and enjoyment and joy as a carnivore, then by all means, please do that. And again, the same goes for some sauces and spices. I would put out there, you probably want to make sure you're avoiding any of the store-made barbecue-y, ketchup-y type ones because they have a lot of sugar. And we all know sugar is nothing but glucose. You don't need that, right? You're trying to get your insulin levels back to where they should be in a healthy way of eating, not constantly in a high state. You don't want to have to worry about being unable to burn your own body fat because you're constantly in a state of high insulin. That's never good. But if you enjoy spicy food, if you enjoy some sauces, mustards and herbs and so forth, and you don't have an issue with them, you don't have any response, like a gut response or allergic response, enjoy them. Absolutely. There's nothing that says you can't. Please, if it makes you enjoy your meat that much better, go right ahead. Again, I can't, so I don't. But if you're able to, you're so lucky. Go for it, right? The thing I want to also kind of point out, and again, guys, sorry, I don't mean to be, I hope you don't think I'm talking down to you or at you or any of that, because I'm definitely not trying to. I know that there's so many of you who are relatively new here, and maybe you're only just starting your journey, or maybe you've been doing it for months, you might have even been doing it for a few years now, or you might just be considering it and looking to start. That's why I point this out. When it comes to blood glucose elevations, and therefore an insulin response, the macronutrient that causes the biggest spike is the carbohydrate macronutrient. Okay, so every single plant in existence will cause an elevation to your blood glucose and therefore an elevation in your insulin. Okay, now different ones will cause different responses. So if you go for, say, some blueberries or some raspberries, they're lower in carbohydrate, therefore the spike won't be as significant as if you were to sit down and eat watermelon or pears or peaches, which are very, very sugary and full of fructose and glucose, right? And or say like starchy like potatoes and carrots. Those are going to have the most significant responses. Protein can also cause an uplift in your blood glucose, although it's far, far less than a carbohydrate. That's why it's advised that you keep your proteins kind of moderate. And plus, and also actually protein is not an excellent source for energy per se. We need protein. We need the animal proteins because we need the essential amino acids that they provide as well as the fatty acids. Okay, so they're critical for building and maintaining our muscle mass, helping with building, maintaining our bone density, as well as just the functioning overall of our different organs and different parts of our body. So we need the proteins, absolutely. But when you reduce your carbohydrates, because that's what we kind of fill up on is the carby stuff, but our bodies burn through it quickly, which is why you can eat, like a full chicken dinner with rice on the side, and an hour later you feel like you're still starving because the carbohydrates don't keep you satisfied for long. Okay. When it comes to switching to carnivore, you don't necessarily need to suddenly eat 4 pounds of meat, and certainly not the lean stuff. You don't need to eat a whole bunch more meat. What you would want to do to help provide you with kickstart your system into burning fat for fuel is up the amount of dietary fat you're consuming. Fat is an excellent source of energy, and your body can access it fairly quickly. Once you are transitioned from a carb-based diet to an animal diet, you will transition and become fat adapted. And when that happens, your body is going to start burning fat more efficiently for fuel. You will be able to, at that point, start tapping into your stored body fat. And that's why there are so many people who have gone carnivore who share about losing major amounts of weight, water weight, yes, but also body fat, because now they are no longer burning up the dietary carbs as they go to provide glucose. They've gotten rid of that, forcing the body to start burning its own stored fat for fuel, which I don't know. I think that's pretty awesome of God to design us that way, right? Like how great is that? How cool is that? And so we may need to get used to enjoying the meat with the fat. Okay, you don't need to suddenly eat a whole plate full of meat to get to that point, but you will probably have to very much increase your animal fat intake, because If you're like I was, you have not had it for a very, very long time, if at all, right? And your body needs to learn to access the good, healthy fats from animals so that it knows, oh, wait a second, this stuff is gonna work for me. This stuff is good. Oh, and I have a whole bunch of it stored here. Oh, I can start tapping into this stuff. Fat is very filling. It has very minimal, like I'm talking like you wouldn't even notice necessarily a spike in your blood glucose by consuming more fat. You wouldn't. It's any slight increase to your blood glucose and insulin is so minor. It's negotiable. It's would not be something you would notice unless you were taking blood tests and you were like science person and you knew exactly this tiny, 1,000th of a microgram or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like it's such a minimal amount of increase potentially in your blood glucose that it's deemed as not even being an increase. So for all intents and purposes, the fat does not affect your blood glucose levels or your insulin. Protein does, slightly, but carbohydrates do massively, which is why we got to get them out or as low as possible. Okay. Keep in mind as well that all plants have some degree of anti-nutrients and oxalates and toxins because that's their defense mechanism. And therefore, they are inherently designed to be much more difficult for humans to consume and digest than, say, the animals who often eat them. Does that mean if you have some blueberries or a bit of broccoli that it's going to kill you right away? No, of course I'm not saying that. However, keep in mind that these things are also containing some degree of oxalates and toxins because that is their natural defense mechanism. And therefore, you just need to be mindful and very careful of that. And that's, for me, as somebody with gut issues and IBS, that's why I avoid them because of those very things, okay? But animal fats that come with the protein or animal protein with the associated fats, what does that mean? So any kind of animal muscle meat and the fat that occurs on it naturally, good for us. It is not what's made us fat. Okay, it was my vast amount of eating, it was the huge amounts of fruit I ate that led to me having extremely high triglycerides and fatty liver disease. It wasn't because I was eating, red meat, because I wasn't at that point. I was barely eating I was eating a little bit of chicken and not much more than that. Okay, it was not consuming ground beef with egg yolks and butter that led me to having high cholesterol or an underactive thyroid or any other inflammation or chronic pain. Those were all sort of a rainbow waterfall, like an overarching approach, an overarching situation that came from way too many processed and starchy carbohydrates in my diet. That is what caused me to have all those problems, not the red meat, not the fat that it came with. So if you are worried, you don't have to be. Honestly, you don't need to be. If you want to get more of a science explanation than what I've given, because I'm just giving you kind of the basics, but if you want a more robust scientific explanation about how it works, you need to check out, and I'll put their names in the description, Professor Ben Bickman, Professor Bart Kay, Dr. Ken Berry, Dr. Philip Ovadia, and Dr. Anthony Chafee. These are like my top 5 go-to medical gurus, scientific gurus on what happens with insulin when it's raised in the body, why we hold on to fat in that case, how do we get the body to start burning fat? We have to lower our insulin. How do we lower insulin? We have to lower the blood glucose, and we do that by removing carbohydrates. That's essentially what it is. So animal fat does not make you fat. If you're eating animals animal meats and fats along with carbohydrates, then yes, you are going to put on weight. You're going to gain fat in your body, okay? Because your body can only can only fuel itself one of two ways. And as long as you've got excessive amounts of carbohydrates in your system that you're eating, you will be a glucose burner, and your body will not allow you to burn off any stored body fat. Doesn't matter how many steps you do. It doesn't matter how many times you go to the gym. If you are eating far too many carbohydrates, keeping your blood glucose and insulin levels elevated, eventually, over time, you will start to gain body fat and you will not be able to get it off. As long as you're keeping that amount of carbs in your diet and therefore keeping your insulin levels at a high level. All right, longer one. Thank you so much for patiently waiting for the end with me, and thanks for all your support. So that was what I wanted to talk to you guys about today. What I wanted to just put out there, I'm not quite sure yet how it's going to look, but I'm going to be putting together kind of a list or a page of suggested meals and or favorite recipes, favorite carnivore recipes from you guys. And that's going to go up on my website. So if you have suggestions, if there's something you love to make, you might think, well, it's just ground beef with butter or eggs, whatever. That's still a meal. So send it in, and I'm going to be compiling some together. And if you would like me to share your handle or your name along with your recipe, please do so. And that way, other people who are coming to me for coaching can see a whole bunch of different, because what I like to eat is clearly not going to be what everyone else likes to eat. And that way, I like any of the new people that are coming to me for coaching to get some ideas of things they can make, things they can try as they start out on this journey. So leave me comments, leave me messages, let me know what you like, what you think, what your favorite recipes are. All right, guys, that's it for today's topic. Thank you for watching. I really always do support. Let me say that again. I always do really appreciate your support, and I thank you very much for all of your love and good words. And I will see you guys tomorrow with the next video. Bye for now.